Yo, what up? All right, so today we're going to be covering one of the greatest, most popular mysteries in the Bible. Something that's probably been wondered and questioned for centuries, for millenniums. There's this story in the Bible where Jesus is preaching in the synagogue, and the religious leaders interrupt him and they abruptly come in, they throw a woman at his feet, and they say this woman has been accused of adultery. Moses in the law says that we should stone her. What do you say we should do? It says that Jesus gets out on the ground and he starts writing on the ground with his finger. The Bible doesn't specify what he was writing. So for centuries, for hundreds of years, people have speculated, they've given their opinions or thoughts of, or their educated guesses on what they think that he must have written. But the answer is actually within the Bible, which is very well concealed. So today we are going to cover and explore and explain what he was doing. So let's start off by reading the story, reading out of John 8, 2-5. At dawn, Jesus appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. When the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery, they made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" Now reading out of John 8:6. They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the ground with his finger. Now some translations say dust, other translations say dirt. So number one, we need to establish what he was writing on. In the original Greek text, the word that was used for ground is gen, G-E-N, which directly translates to ground. It doesn't say dust, it doesn't say dirt, it says ground. Okay? So now that we have established that he wasn't writing on dirt, but on the ground, we have to now figure out what the ground was made of. Before we go into that, we have to point out what the Pharisees are trying to do. The spirit of discernment is a spirit that allows you to be able to see people's intentions. When you don't see their action, but you see the intention behind the action. So when they came to throw this woman at his feet, Jesus, all he ever spoke about was grace and forgiveness. That's all he spoke about, was about the forgiveness of God, and he would forgive sins. And they were mad at him because they said only God can forgive sins. But Jesus is God, so that's why he was able to forgive sins. But when they would confront him about that, they would tell him, "You're not keeping the law of Moses." Reading out of Matthew 5:17, these are Jesus' words. Because I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but fulfill them. So you see, so the Pharisees here thought, if we throw this woman at his feet in front of everybody watching, and we're going to ask him, what should we do with her? If he says, forgive her, don't stone her, then he is breaking the law of Moses. And he said he came to fulfill the law, not to abolish it. But if he says stone her, well, then he's keeping the law of Moses, but then he's gonna look like a hypocrite and a liar, because all he ever preaches about is forgiveness. So they thought that they had him. They're like, we have him here now. Like, no matter what he says, we cornered him against the wall. Okay? So now, and Jesus knew this. So now that we have established what their intentions were, and that he was writing on ground, not on dirt. Now let's go to figure out what the ground was made of. See, the first temple that was built by Solomon, and it was built, he's the son of David. When Israel was conquered by King Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian Empire, it says that they destroyed the temple. And then it was rebuilt under the permission of King Cyrus, the Persian Empire, by Ezra. So reading out of Ezra 6, 3-4. In the first year of King Cyrus, the king issued a decree concerning the temple of God in Jerusalem. Let the temple be rebuilt as a place to present sacrifices, and let its foundations be laid. It is to be 60 cubits high and 60 cubits wide, with 3 layers of large stones and 1 layer of timber. Let the cost be paid from the royal treasury. So right here we read that the king said, let the foundations be laid, and the foundations were made of stone. Now reading out of, this is another part in the Bible, in the book of Haggai 2-15. Think back before you set out to lay the first foundation of stones for rebuilding of my temple. That was God speaking. And there's many other scriptures across the Bible that specify that the foundations of the temple were made of stone. You see, God went out of his way to put breadcrumbs all across the Bible, letting us know that the ground of the temple was made of stone. So now when we go back to John 8:2, when it says that Jesus knelt down and he was writing on the ground, we know that it wasn't dirt, it wasn't dust, that he was actually writing on stone, that his finger was writing on stone. You see, like I said, Jesus knew what these Pharisees were trying to do, because these Pharisees, they took pride that they knew the law of Moses like the back of their hand. They had it memorized, they studied it. They thought that they knew everything that the law of Moses entitled. You see, so Jesus, knowing this, he got down in the middle of them speaking and he started writing with his finger on the stone. And all this time we've been asking the wrong question. We've been asking, what was Jesus writing? That's the wrong question. The correct question is, what was he symbolizing? Because as they were speaking and Jesus knowing their intentions, he got down and with his finger, he was writing on the stone and he was saying, you think that you know the law of Moses better than I do? You think that you can outsmart me in the law of Moses? This same finger that is touching this stone right now, writing on this stone, is the exact same finger that wrote the law of Moses on the rock of Mount Sinai when I gave it. You see, reading out of Deuteronomy 9:10, this is Moses speaking, the Lord. And right there in the Hebrew, the word that he used for Lord was Yahweh. Yahweh means Savior. Yeshua means Savior. In the Old Testament, whenever you see Yahweh or the angel of the Lord, that is Jesus Christ before he was incarnated. So Yahweh gave me the 2 tablets on which he had written with his own finger all the words he had spoken to you from the heart of the fire when you were assembled at the mountain. When Moses went up Mount Sinai, it says that Yahweh, which is Jesus, that he wrote the 10 commandments with his own finger on the mountain rock, and he cut out the 2 tablets and gave them to Moses. You see, so when Jesus got down and he was writing with his finger, he was symbolizing, you think you know the law of Moses better than I do? I wrote the law of Moses with my finger, the way that he was touching stone that day. Now it says that he stood up and he said, the one with no sin cast the first stone. And one by one, they started dropping their stones. You see, the only one who had no sin was Jesus. The only one who had the ability and the right to cast the stone was Jesus. And the only one who wasn't holding the stone was Jesus. You see, the stones that they had in their hands also represents the law, because the law, when it's broken, it demands payments. It demands judgment. And it says in the Bible that there is no forgiveness of sin without the shedding of blood. So for Jesus to be able to let her go free was because he was going to die for her at the cross. He was going to take her judgment. So when he let her go, it was because he was going to die for her. And then it says that they dropped their stones one by one and that he stooped down a second time, reading out of John 8:8. And again, Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground a second time. Why did he do it 2 times? Because the first time that Moses came down Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets in his hands, it says that he found an entire nation of Israel worshiping a golden calf, partying and drinking and having a giant orgy. And it says that Moses picked up the 2 tablets out of anger and he smashed them and he broke them. After he did that, he had to go up the mountain and he got a second set of tablets. So when Jesus got down a second time and he wrote it, he was signifying to all of them, I wrote the law of Moses not 1 time, but 2 times. You see, now reading out of John 8:9-11, when the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd, until Jesus only was left in the middle with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? And she said, no, Lord. Then neither do I condemn you. Now go and sin no more. There's a lot of symbolism here. You see, she had her face towards the ground. The ground was made of stone. The stone represents the law of Moses. Because when you're under the law makes you look at your own actions. It's a mirror. The law doesn't bend. There is no grace in the law. The law is straight. So when she was looking down, she was crying because she was about to get stoned to death, knowing that she had broken the law. But when nobody was around, Jesus came up to her and said, "Where are your accusers?" So at that moment, she took her eyes off the ground, which was made of stone, which represents the law, and she looked up at Jesus, who is grace. And the reason why Jesus waited till they were alone, because what it signifies is at the end of your life, when you die and you go before God, none of your accusers are going to be there. It's just going to be you and him. He's your only judge. And your judge declares you innocent because he took that judgment for you. You see, and then he lets her go from there. So what Jesus was doing that day, he wasn't writing anything down. He was symbolizing to the Pharisees that they're not, you cannot outsmart me in the law that I wrote 2 times, because he is Yahweh, and Yahweh was Jesus before he was incarnated, and he himself with his own finger wrote the law of Moses. You see, now I'm going to give you guys some little extra credit. Moses, every Bible character represents Jesus. They're a characteristic of Jesus. Every Bible character in the Old Testament is the face of Jesus. Moses represents the second coming of Christ, right? Because when Moses went up the mountain, it says that he was up there for 40 days and 40 nights without eating or drinking. The way that Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights when he was fasting before Satan came to tempt him. It says that the people of Israel were complaining and they're saying, Moses has been gone for over a month. Who knows what happened to him? He's not going to come back. Who knows when he will come back, or even if he will. And that's when they built that golden calf and they started worshiping it. The way that Jesus Christ has been in heaven for so long, and people today are saying, Jesus has been gone for so long. He's not coming back. When is he going to come back? That Bible story, it's not real. He would have came back by now. They've been saying that for so long. And when Jesus returns a second time, he's going to find a world in chaos. The way when Moses came down the mountain, he found the entire nation of Israel partying, having a wild orgy, and worshiping idols. The way when Jesus Christ returns for the second time, he's going to find the entire world in darkness and sin, partying and full of sin and murders and thefts and orgies and worshiping false gods. You see, so that represents the world in one way, and the other way it also represents Israel directly. Because it says that in the end times, during the 7-year tribulation, that the Antichrist is going to rebuild the Temple of Solomon that's in Jerusalem. And when he rebuilds the Temple of Solomon, he's going to erect an image of himself inside it. He's going to force everyone to worship it and receive the mark of the beast. The same way when Moses came down, he found Israel worshiping a false god. The way when Jesus returns, he's going to find a false god in his temple and people are going to be worshiping it. See, so every Bible character represents Jesus. On the next teaching, I'm going to be going through every Bible character from Abraham all the way, all of them. There's many of them, I can't name them all. And each one of them represents a certain characteristic of Jesus Christ. But that concludes today's message. And that is the answer to this great mystery that's been wondered for many years. Till next time.